Imagine being told over and over again that you are not good enough, not talented enough, not attractive enough, not what people are looking for. Now imagine hearing those words as a child while chasing a dream that already seemed impossible. Most people know Leonardo DiCaprio as one of the greatest actors of his generation. They remember the standing ovations, the blockbuster films, the awards, the red carpets, and the global fame. They see the confident movie star who worked with the biggest directors in the world and became one of Hollywood's most recognizable faces. What most people never see is the version of Leonardo DiCaprio that existed before any of that happened. The version who walked into audition rooms filled with hope and walked out carrying disappointment. The version who spent years hearing rejection from people whose job was to decide whether dreams lived or died. Because long before Hollywood celebrated him, Hollywood ignored him. And for a young actor trying to find his place in an industry built on judgment, every rejection felt personal. Every closed door raised the same question. What if they are right? What if the dream is bigger than your ability? What if the people making the decisions can already see a future that you cannot? These questions haunt almost every ambitious person at some point in life. But what makes Leonardo's story remarkable is not the success that eventually came. It is what happened during the years when success seemed nowhere in sight. While other young actors chased fame, Leonardo was fighting a completely different battle. A battle against discouragement, a battle against uncertainty, a battle against becoming another forgotten name among thousands of hopeful performers arriving in Los Angeles every year. Because talent alone was never enough. Hollywood is filled with talented people. What separates the few who survive from the many who disappear is something much harder to measure. It is what they do after rejection. And Leonardo DiCaprio would soon discover that rejection has a strange way of revealing character. Some people treat rejection as proof they should quit. Others use it as evidence that they need to work harder. The difference between those two choices often determines an entire future. The young boy growing up in a rough part of Los Angeles had no way of knowing that one day he would become a global icon. He had no way of knowing that millions of people would admire his work. He had no way of knowing that the same industry that doubted him would eventually celebrate him. All he knew was that he wanted an opportunity, just one opportunity. But before that opportunity arrived, life would force him through challenges that most people never hear about. Challenges that shaped his resilience. Challenges that tested his confidence. Challenges that almost convinced him to walk away. And perhaps the most surprising part of this story is that the rejection itself was never the greatest obstacle. The greatest obstacle was learning how to keep believing when nobody else did. Because there is a moment in every extraordinary journey when success is invisible, when progress cannot be measured, when effort produces no reward, when quitting appears more reasonable than continuing. That moment arrived many times in Leonardo DiCaprio's life, and yet he kept moving forward. The question is why? What allowed him to endure years of uncertainty while so many others gave up? What transformed a struggling young actor into one of the most respected names in Hollywood? The answer begins long before the cameras, the fame, and the fortune. It begins in a world far removed from the glamour people associate with Leonardo DiCaprio today. A world of struggle, instability, and lessons that would quietly prepare him for battles he could not yet see coming. Growing up in chaos and learning to fight early. Long before Leonardo DiCaprio faced rejection in Hollywood, he was learning a much harsher lesson. Life was not fair. The Los Angeles that appears in movies is often filled with luxury, palm trees, and opportunity. But the Los Angeles Leonardo experienced as a child looked very different. He grew up in a neighborhood where crime, poverty, and instability were part of everyday life. Violence was not something he watched on television. It was something he saw around him. Drug activity, dangerous streets, and constant uncertainty formed the backdrop of his childhood. Many people assume successful actors come from privileged backgrounds. Leonardo did not. His parents separated when he was very young. Although they remained supportive, financial struggles were a constant reality. There were no powerful family connections waiting to open doors for him. There was no roadmap leading toward Hollywood success. There was simply a young boy trying to understand the world around him. What made this environment so important was not the hardship itself. It was how the hardship shaped his perspective. While many children grow up protected from life's harsh realities, Leonardo was exposed to them early. He saw people making destructive choices. He saw what happened when individuals lost hope. He saw dreams abandoned before they ever had a chance to grow. Without realizing it, he was receiving an education that no acting school could provide. He was learning about human behavior, fear, anger, desperation, survival. Years later, these observations would become one of his greatest strengths as an actor. He understood emotions not as abstract concepts, but as realities he had witnessed firsthand. But at the time, none of that seemed important. At the time, he was simply trying to find a way out. Acting became more than a hobby. It became a possibility, a glimpse of a different future. While other children imagined becoming famous, Leonardo became fascinated with performance itself. He loved entertaining people. He loved transforming into different characters. He loved the challenge of stepping into someone else's world. Yet even then, there was no guarantee that passion would lead anywhere. In fact, the odds suggested the opposite. Thousands of young people dreamed of becoming actors. Almost none succeeded. The dream was crowded with competition and disappointment. But there was already something unusual developing inside him, an ability to endure discomfort, an ability to keep moving despite uncertainty. Most people look at successful careers and focus on breakthrough moments. What they often miss are the years spent building invisible strength before the breakthrough ever arrives. Leonardo's childhood was doing exactly that. The difficult neighborhood, the financial instability, the family challenges, the uncertainty. Each experience was quietly strengthening muscles he would later need when Hollywood began rejecting him. Because rejection hits differently when you have never faced adversity. But when life has already taught you resilience, rejection becomes something else. Not a wall, a test. And without knowing it, Leonardo DiCaprio was preparing for a test much bigger than anything he had faced so far. A test that would begin the moment he started walking into audition rooms and asking strangers to believe in him. The boy who didn't fit anyone's expectations. When Leonardo DiCaprio began pursuing acting seriously, he quickly discovered something frustrating. Wanting an opportunity was not enough. Working hard was not enough. Even talent was not always enough. Because Hollywood had a habit of placing people into categories before they had a chance to prove themselves. Casting directors were constantly searching for specific looks, specific personalities, and specific types of performers. They wanted actors who fit neatly into predefined boxes. Leonardo did not, at least not in the beginning. He wasn't the obvious choice. He wasn't the guaranteed star. He wasn't the young actor who walked into a room and immediately matched every expectation. And in an industry where first impressions can determine careers, that created a serious problem. Audition after audition, he found himself competing against hundreds of other hopeful actors. Many of them looked more polished. Many appeared more experienced. Many seemed to fit exactly what producers believed they wanted. The rejection that followed was often swift and unforgiving. Sometimes he would prepare for days only to be dismissed within minutes. Sometimes he wouldn't even receive an explanation. Just silence. A silent message that seemed to say, "We're looking for someone else." For many young actors, this is where confidence begins to collapse, because rejection becomes repetitive, and repetitive rejection can slowly transform into self-doubt. You start asking dangerous questions. Maybe I'm not talented enough. Maybe everyone else sees something I don't. Maybe this dream belongs to somebody else. Leonardo faced those same thoughts. The difference was what he did next. Instead of changing himself to fit every trend, he became obsessed with understanding why some performers were unforgettable. He started studying more than acting. He studied presence. He studied emotion. He studied authenticity. He noticed that the performers who left lasting impressions were rarely the ones trying hardest to please everyone. They were the ones bringing something unique into the room, something impossible to copy. This realization changed everything. Rather than chasing approval, Leonardo began focusing on becoming better, not more popular, not more accepted. Better. It was a subtle shift, but it would eventually define his entire career. While others focused on getting hired, he became focused on growth. While others worried about being chosen, he worked on becoming impossible to ignore. The irony was that the very qualities causing rejection were often the same qualities that would later make him stand out. The intensity, the emotional depth, the willingness to take risks, the refusal to become a predictable performer. At the time, however, none of that looked like an advantage. It looked like failure, and that is one of the most deceptive moments in any journey. Sometimes the traits that make a person exceptional initially appear to be weaknesses. Sometimes what feels like a disadvantage is actually differentiation. But recognizing that requires patience, a level of patience most people never develop. As rejection continued to arrive, Leonardo faced a choice. He could spend his energy trying to become what others wanted, or he could invest that energy becoming the best version of himself. The decision he made would become one of the most important turning points of his life, because soon, the endless stream of rejection would force him to develop a skill that separates dreamers from achievers, the ability to turn every no into fuel for the next attempt. The art of turning no into fuel. There comes a point in every ambitious person's life when rejection stops being an occasional disappointment and starts feeling like a permanent reality. For Leonardo DiCaprio, that point arrived early. The auditions kept coming, so did the rejections. Some were polite, some were blunt, most were forgettable. But together, they created something dangerous. Accumulated doubt, not the kind that appears overnight, but the kind that slowly builds after hearing no so many times that it begins to sound like the truth. This is where many dreams quietly die, not because people lack talent, not because they lack opportunity, but because repeated disappointment slowly convinces them that the effort is no longer worth it. Leonardo found himself standing at that exact crossroads. Every actor dreams about the role that changes everything. What nobody talks about are the countless auditions that lead nowhere. The hours of preparation, the travel, the anticipation, the hope. Then the phone doesn't ring, or it rings with bad news, and the cycle starts again. For a young actor trying to build a future, this emotional roller coaster can be exhausting. Yet something unusual began happening inside Leonardo during these years. Instead of measuring success by the number of jobs he booked, he started measuring success differently. He measured it by improvement. A small shift in mindset, a massive shift in results. After each rejection, he would look for lessons instead of excuses. What could be better? What felt authentic? What felt forced? What worked? What failed? Most people treat rejection like a verdict. Leonardo began treating it like feedback. That distinction changed everything, because a verdict ends a conversation. Feedback starts one. Little by little, he stopped seeing auditions as final exams. He started seeing them as training sessions, opportunities to sharpen skills, opportunities to learn under pressure, opportunities to improve his craft, even when nobody was watching. This approach gave him an advantage that many competitors lacked. Every rejection was making him stronger. While others became discouraged, he was becoming experienced. While others became bitter, he was becoming prepared. And preparation compounds. Just like money, just like knowledge, just like confidence. The improvements were often invisible at first. No headlines, no awards, no public recognition. But beneath the surface, something powerful was happening. He was building emotional endurance, the ability to stay focused when results were absent, the ability to maintain belief without evidence, the ability to continue moving forward while uncertainty remained. These qualities are rarely celebrated because they are difficult to see, yet they often determine who succeeds and who disappears. The truth is that most careers are not destroyed by one catastrophic failure. They are destroyed by accumulated discouragement, 1,000 small disappointments that eventually convince someone to stop trying. Leonardo refused to let that happen. He chose a different interpretation. Every rejection became proof that he was still in the game. Every failed audition became proof that he was still showing up. Every disappointment became another step forward, even when progress was invisible. What he did not realize was that this mindset was preparing him for something much bigger than another audition. Because somewhere in Hollywood, opportunities were beginning to appear. Small opportunities, uncertain opportunities, the kind that most people overlook. But sometimes the smallest opportunity becomes the doorway to an entirely different future. And Leonardo DiCaprio was about to discover that someone, somewhere, had finally started paying attention. The secret that set him apart from other young actors. By the time Leonardo DiCaprio reached his teenage years, something unusual had happened. The constant rejection had not made him weaker. It had made him curious. Most young actors spend their early careers trying to impress people. Leonardo became obsessed with understanding people. This distinction would eventually separate him from countless talented performers competing for the same opportunities. While many actors focused on memorizing lines and delivering performances exactly as expected, Leonardo was becoming fascinated by something deeper: human behavior. He wanted to understand why people made certain decisions, why they lied, why they loved, why they feared, why they broke under pressure, why they fought for things that seemed impossible. The more he observed people, the more he realized that great acting was not about pretending, it was about understanding. Understanding emotions so deeply that audiences could forget they were watching a performance. This mindset transformed the way he approached his craft. Instead of asking, "How should I act in this scene?" he began asking, "What would this person actually feel?" It sounds simple, but it changed everything because authenticity is difficult to fake. Audiences may not always understand why a performance feels real, but they know when it does. And Leonardo was slowly developing an ability that could not be taught easily: empathy. The ability to step inside someone else's reality. The ability to see the world through another person's fears, desires, and struggles. While other young actors chased attention, Leonardo chased understanding. He watched people carefully. He studied reactions. He paid attention to details most individuals ignored. The hesitation before a difficult decision, the nervous movement of a hand, the subtle change in someone's voice when they were afraid. These observations became tools, not for manipulation, for storytelling, because the greatest performances often emerge from truth rather than technique, and Leonardo was becoming a collector of truth. The industry had not fully recognized it yet. Most casting directors still saw another young actor trying to get a break. But beneath the surface, he was building something far more valuable than popularity: depth. Depth creates longevity. Popularity can disappear overnight. Depth remains. This difference would later explain why some actors rise quickly and vanish just as fast, while others continue evolving for decades. Leonardo was unknowingly preparing for the second path. Yet there was another reason this period mattered. His growing obsession with authenticity gave him a unique advantage when opportunities finally appeared, because opportunities rarely arrive fully formed. They arrive disguised as small chances, small roles, small moments, small openings, and when those moments appear, preparation becomes visible. Many people think success happens when luck arrives. In reality, success often happens when preparation finally meets opportunity. Leonardo's years of observation, study, and relentless improvement had prepared him for that moment. The question was whether the industry would notice, and soon, a series of performances would begin forcing Hollywood to see what it had overlooked for years. The boy who once struggled to fit expectations was about to make people pay attention for an entirely different reason. He no longer needed to fit the mold. He was becoming impossible to ignore. When Hollywood finally started paying attention for years, Leonardo DiCaprio had been preparing for an opportunity that might never come. At least, that was how it felt. The auditions, the rejection, the self-doubt, the endless effort with little visible reward. Most people would have looked at those years and seen stagnation, but something important was happening beneath the surface. He was becoming ready. Then the industry began to notice. Not all at once, not through a single miraculous breakthrough, and not through overnight success. The truth is often less dramatic and far more interesting. Leonardo's rise started with small victories that most people would have ignored, roles that were not guaranteed to change his life, projects that carried uncertainty, opportunities that required him to prove himself again and again. The difference was that he treated every role as if it were the most important role of his career. Many actors wait for a big opportunity before giving their best. Leonardo approached it differently. He gave his best before the big opportunity arrived. That decision changed everything. Because directors talk, producers talk, casting agents talk, and in Hollywood, reputation travels faster than success. People started noticing the same thing. This young actor was unusually committed. He wasn't showing up simply to be seen. He was showing up to create something memorable, even in smaller roles, even when nobody expected much, even when the spotlight was focused elsewhere. Slowly, conversations began changing. Instead of asking whether Leonardo was talented, industry professionals started asking how far he could go. That is a completely different conversation. One is about potential, the other is about possibility, and possibility attracts attention. As his performances grew stronger, another important shift occurred. He stopped competing only against other young actors. He began competing against expectations. Every new role expanded what people believed he could do. Every performance revealed another layer of his abilities, and that created momentum. The kind of momentum that cannot be manufactured through publicity. The kind that emerges when preparation finally becomes visible. Yet success brought a new challenge. For the first time, people were watching closely. For the first time, expectations were increasing. For the first time, mistakes carried larger consequences. Many careers collapse at this stage, not because opportunities disappear, because pressure arrives, the pressure to repeat success, the pressure to justify attention, the pressure to prove that early praise was deserved. Leonardo now faced a completely different battle than the one he had fought during his years of rejection. Back then, he was trying to be noticed. Now, he had to prove he belonged. And this is where many promising careers reach a turning point. Some individuals become trapped by expectations, others use expectations as fuel. Leonardo chose the second path. Instead of becoming comfortable, he became more ambitious. Instead of protecting his growing reputation, he continued pushing himself. He understood something many people do not. The opportunity that changes your life is not the finish line. It is the beginning of a much bigger test. Because once Hollywood starts paying attention, every decision matters more, every role matters more, every risk matters more. And Leonardo DiCaprio was about to make a decision so bold that it could either elevate his career to an entirely new level or destroy everything he had worked so hard to build. The risky decision that could have destroyed his career. Success creates a dangerous illusion. The illusion that the safest path is the smartest path. When an actor finally gains attention, the logical move seems obvious. Accept similar roles, repeat what worked, protect the momentum, avoid unnecessary risks. Many careers are built exactly that way. Many careers also become forgettable that way. As Leonardo DiCaprio's reputation began growing, Hollywood started offering him opportunities that seemed attractive on the surface. The industry had finally noticed him. The recognition he had spent years chasing was beginning to arrive, but Leonardo faced a dilemma that would shape the rest of his life. Should he become what Hollywood wanted him to be, or should he become the actor he wanted to be? Those are not always the same thing. The entertainment industry often rewards predictability. When audiences like a particular version of an actor, studios frequently try to reproduce that version again and again. It is financially safer, it is commercially safer, it is creatively dangerous. Leonardo understood this risk early. He knew that being successful once was not enough. The greater challenge was remaining relevant for decades. That required something more difficult than popularity. It required courage. The courage to disappoint expectations. The courage to choose uncertainty over comfort. The courage to risk failure publicly. As larger opportunities appeared, Leonardo became increasingly selective. Instead of chasing roles designed solely to maximize fame, he gravitated toward characters that challenged him. Complex characters, flawed characters, uncomfortable characters, characters that demanded transformation. From a career perspective, this strategy carried significant risk. Audiences can be unpredictable. Critics can be unforgiving. A poor choice can damage years of momentum. Many actors avoid these risks because they fear losing what they have gained. Leonardo seemed more afraid of something else, becoming predictable. He understood that growth rarely happens inside comfortable territory. Every major step forward in his career required him to enter situations where failure remained a real possibility. That willingness distinguished him from many of his contemporaries, because confidence is often misunderstood. People assume confidence means believing you will succeed. Real confidence is moving forward despite knowing you might fail. And Leonardo kept moving toward uncertainty. Each ambitious role expanded his range. Each challenge deepened his abilities. Each risk strengthened his credibility. Slowly, a new image emerged. He was no longer simply a promising young actor. He was becoming an artist, someone willing to sacrifice comfort in pursuit of excellence, someone willing to prioritize long-term respect over short-term applause. The transformation did not happen overnight. It happened through decisions, one decision after another. Decisions that often looked risky in the moment, but became obvious only in hindsight. That is the nature of bold choices. People admire them after they work. Few support them before they do. Yet the greatest surprise was still ahead, because one opportunity was approaching that would change everything. An opportunity so enormous that it would make Leonardo DiCaprio one of the most recognized people on the planet. The fame would be unlike anything he had ever experienced. The attention would become overwhelming. And the success would introduce a problem far more complicated than rejection. A problem that has destroyed countless careers. The challenge of surviving global fame without losing yourself. The invisible price of sudden success. Most people imagine success as the moment when all problems disappear. The breakthrough arrives, the dream comes true, the struggle ends. But for Leonardo DiCaprio, success revealed a surprising truth. Some problems disappear when you become famous. Others become much larger. After years of fighting to be noticed, he suddenly found himself in a situation few people on Earth will ever experience. The world was watching. Not occasionally, constantly. His face was everywhere, his name was everywhere. His life became a subject of public fascination. Millions of people felt like they knew him, yet very few actually did. From the outside, it looked like the perfect reward, the recognition, the opportunities, the admiration, the wealth. Everything a young actor could dream about. But fame carries a hidden cost that rarely appears in headlines. Privacy begins to disappear. Ordinary moments become public events. Simple decisions become news stories. Mistakes become global conversations. And expectations grow larger with every success. The challenge was no longer getting attention. The challenge was surviving it. Many talented people reach this stage and lose direction. Some become addicted to approval. Some become trapped by their public image. Some spend the rest of their careers trying to recreate past victories. The attention that once felt exciting becomes a prison. Leonardo recognized this danger. He understood that fame itself was not an achievement. It was a consequence of the work. And if he allowed fame to become the focus, the work would suffer. This realization influenced many of the choices he made moving forward. While countless celebrities embraced constant exposure, Leonardo often appeared to move in the opposite direction. He seemed more interested in protecting his craft than feeding public curiosity. This was not always easy, because fame has a way of changing the environment around you. People begin treating you differently. Some become impressed by your success, others become intimidated. Some tell you only what they think you want to hear. The more famous you become, the harder it can be to receive honest feedback. And honest feedback is essential for growth. Leonardo had spent years developing his abilities through learning, adapting, and improving. Now he faced a new danger, believing his own hype. Many careers begin declining at the exact moment people assume they have reached the top. Success creates comfort. Comfort creates stagnation. Stagnation slowly erodes excellence. Leonardo seemed determined to avoid that trap. Instead of acting like someone who had arrived, he continued behaving like someone who still had something to prove. That mindset became one of the most important reasons for his longevity. Because while the public focused on his fame, Leonardo remained focused on evolution. He understood that attention is temporary, respect must be earned repeatedly. And there was another challenge emerging on the horizon, a challenge even more difficult than handling fame. Hollywood had begun attaching a label to him, a label that threatened to define his entire career, a label that could limit every future opportunity. The question was whether he would accept it, or whether he would fight against it. The answer would determine whether Leonardo DiCaprio became a temporary sensation or a lasting legend. The war against his own label. There is a moment in many successful careers when the world decides who you are, not who you actually are, who they believe you are. And once that label takes hold, escaping it can become one of the hardest battles a person will ever face. Leonardo DiCaprio discovered this firsthand. After achieving massive visibility and becoming one of the most recognizable faces in entertainment, public perception began to solidify around a simplified version of him. For many people, he was no longer simply an actor. He was a celebrity, a heartthrob, a box office attraction, a familiar face. At first glance, that may not sound like a problem. After all, millions of actors would gladly accept that level of attention. But Leonardo saw something others missed. Labels can become cages. The more successful the label becomes, the harder it becomes to grow beyond it. Hollywood has a long history of placing performers into categories: the action star, the romantic lead, the comedian, the villain. The industry loves predictability because predictability feels safe. Audiences know what to expect. Studios know what to market. Investors know what to fund. But artists often suffer inside those boundaries. Leonardo understood that if he allowed others to define him too narrowly, his future would become smaller, not larger. The danger was subtle. Nobody was telling him to stop growing. Nobody was ordering him to stay the same. The pressure came from expectations that rewarded familiarity, expectations that encouraged repetition, expectations that quietly whispered, "Keep doing what already works." For many people, those expectations are comforting. For Leonardo, they became a challenge. He had spent too many years fighting for opportunities to allow success to limit his potential. So he made a difficult decision. He would actively pursue roles that challenged public perception, roles that created uncertainty, roles that forced audiences to see him differently. This was not a strategy designed to maximize popularity. It was a strategy designed to earn respect. And there is an important difference between those two goals. Popularity asks people to like you. Respect asks people to recognize your ability. Popularity can arrive quickly. Respect often takes years. Leonardo chose the longer path. Again, just as he had done during his years of rejection, just as he had done when he risked comfort for growth. The pattern was becoming clear. Whenever faced with a choice between safety and development, he consistently chose development. That decision gradually changed how the industry viewed him. Directors began seeing possibilities that had previously gone unnoticed. Critics began recognizing dimensions that casual observers had overlooked. Audiences started expecting depth instead of familiarity. And something remarkable happened. The label that once threatened to limit him began losing its power, not because he argued against it, not because he complained about it, because he outgrew it. That is often how the most powerful transformations occur, not through words, through evidence, through consistent action, through undeniable results. But the story was not over. Breaking free from a label is one challenge. Remaining relevant across decades is another entirely. The entertainment industry constantly changes. New stars emerge, trends shift, audiences evolve. Many careers fade because they cannot adapt. Leonardo now faced a question that would define the next stage of his journey. How do you stay extraordinary after the world already knows your name? The answer would require reinvention, again and again and again. How he reinvented himself again and again. One of the greatest myths about success is the belief that reaching the top is the hardest part. It isn't. Staying there is. History is filled with talented people who achieved extraordinary success for a brief moment, only to slowly disappear from relevance. They didn't lose their talent. They didn't lose their ambition. They lost their ability to evolve. Leonardo DiCaprio seemed determined not to become one of them. As the years passed, he recognized something that many successful people fail to understand. The skills that create success are not always the same skills required to sustain it. What works in one decade may fail in the next. What impresses audiences today may feel outdated tomorrow. The entertainment industry moves relentlessly forward, and anyone who stops growing eventually falls behind. Instead of resisting change, Leonardo embraced it. He refused to rely on old formulas. He refused to become a copy of his younger self. He refused to treat past accomplishments as permanent guarantees of future success. This mindset became one of his most powerful advantages. While many performers tried to preserve their image, Leonardo focused on expanding his capabilities. Each new chapter of his career introduced different challenges, different expectations, different creative demands, different risks. Rather than asking how to protect his position, he asked how to improve it. That question kept him moving forward. Growth requires humility, and humility becomes increasingly difficult as success increases. The world begins celebrating you. Awards accumulate. Financial security arrives. Influence grows. At that point, many people stop listening. They stop learning, they stop questioning themselves. Leonardo appeared to move in the opposite direction. The more accomplished he became, the more committed he remained to development. This attitude transformed his career into something rare: longevity, not a few successful years, decades of relevance, decades of credibility, decades of evolution. Every reinvention carried uncertainty. Every new challenge carried risk. There was always the possibility that audiences would reject the next version of him, yet he continued taking those chances, because standing still felt more dangerous than moving forward. That philosophy applies far beyond acting. In every profession, every business, every personal journey, there comes a moment when previous success becomes insufficient. The world changes, technology changes, competition changes. The people who survive are rarely the ones who cling to old victories. They are the ones who keep adapting. Leonardo's career became a masterclass in adaptation. Not adaptation driven by fear, adaptation driven by curiosity, a desire to explore new possibilities rather than defend old achievements. Over time, this approach produced something more valuable than fame: trust. Audiences trusted that he would challenge himself. Directors trusted that he would commit fully. The industry trusted that he would continue evolving. And trust creates opportunities that fame alone cannot provide. Looking back, it becomes clear that his journey was never really about becoming famous. It was about becoming better, again and again, year after year, challenge after challenge. But perhaps the most important lesson was still waiting, because when people talk about Leonardo DiCaprio's career, they often focus on the awards, the recognition, and the achievements. Yet the greatest victory of his life may have nothing to do with any trophy. It may be something far more meaningful. Something that began the very first time he heard the word no. His greatest victory was never an award. When people look at Leonardo DiCaprio's life today, they often see the outcome. They see the success, they see the fame, they see the iconic performances, they see the awards, the recognition, and the legacy. What they rarely see is the long chain of moments that made those achievements possible. The auditions that led nowhere, the opportunities that never came, the disappointments that nobody remembers, the years when success existed only as a possibility. Because the truth is that Leonardo DiCaprio's story was never really about Hollywood. It was never really about celebrity, and it was never really about becoming famous. At its core, this is a story about persistence, a story about refusing to let rejection become identity. Many people experience rejection. Few people survive it without allowing it to define them. That is what makes this journey remarkable. Every rejection carried a hidden message, a message that could have been interpreted in two completely different ways. One interpretation said, "You are not good enough." The other said, "Keep going." The words were often the same. The meaning depended entirely on the person hearing them. Leonardo chose the second interpretation. Again and again. When opportunities disappeared, he continued preparing. When expectations limited him, he continued growing. When fame threatened to distract him, he continued evolving. And when success finally arrived, he treated it not as proof that he had finished the journey, but as evidence that the journey itself mattered. This is why his story resonates far beyond acting, because almost everyone encounters their own version of rejection. A rejected application, a failed business, a lost opportunity, a dream that seems delayed, a goal that feels increasingly distant. In those moments, it becomes tempting to assume that rejection is a verdict, that a closed door represents a final answer. But history repeatedly tells a different story. Some of the most accomplished people in the world were initially dismissed by the very institutions that later celebrated them. The difference was not talent alone. The difference was endurance. The willingness to continue when results were invisible. The willingness to keep improving when recognition was absent. The willingness to believe before there was evidence. Leonardo DiCaprio's greatest achievement may not be a film. It may not be an award. It may not even be his place in Hollywood history. His greatest achievement may be something much simpler. He never allowed temporary rejection to become a permanent conclusion. That decision changed everything, because every chapter of his life that followed was built on a choice made years earlier. A choice to keep showing up, a choice to keep learning, a choice to keep moving forward. And perhaps that is the most powerful lesson hidden inside this story. The people we admire most are not always the ones who faced the fewest obstacles. They are often the ones who refused to surrender when the obstacles appeared. Leonardo DiCaprio became a Hollywood icon, not because rejection disappeared from his life. He became a Hollywood icon because rejection never gained control of it. And somewhere, right now, there is someone standing at the same crossroads he once faced. Someone questioning their abilities, someone doubting their future, someone wondering whether another failure means it is time to quit. If Leonardo DiCaprio's journey teaches us anything, it is this. The moment that feels like the end of your story may actually be the chapter that makes the rest of it possible.